I joined Next15 about 3.5 years ago. We're AIM-listed technology-driven marketing group, and that means we got a collection of marketing services group. I've been with us for 3.5 years, and it's been quite a fun ride. A little bit of history. The group actually started over 30 years ago when two guys got into the, realized there was quite a sort of opening for helping technology companies with their sort of communication, really getting the message across to their key stakeholders. My boss, Tim Dyson, joined 33 years ago, so I've never been good at numbers. And he effectively is a real sort of tech geek. He loves technology. He won Microsoft as a client, hence moved to Seattle and actually worked with Bill Gates in terms of framing the communication challenges and communication for Microsoft. And then as Microsoft expanded, we then opened up offices all around the world. And at peak, we had about 30, we operated in about 30 countries. We then were so successful in terms of winning other technology clients that he moved to San Francisco, where he's been for the last 30 years, hence why you have me. We then listed on AIM and went through a period of fairly rapid expansion organically. And then about 10 years ago, Tim, it was pretty obvious that technology was going to massively change the way people communicate with each other and latterly massively disrupt the way sort of companies do their business. So over the last few years, we've been fairly busy updating and upgrading the quality of our existing companies, as well as acquiring new digital-only tech companies, initially in the US, and then more latterly since I joined in the UK. So wind the clock to today, we've now got just over 1,600 people in 32 offices in 14 countries. And we operate through a portfolio of 17 brands, which are all fairly independently managed by experienced, highly incentivized management teams. In terms of the management team, Richard Ayres, our chairman, he actually worked with me because I was previously CFO at Capital Radio many years ago, and he was my first boss. He's been my mentor ever since, and in fact he was the key reasons for my joining the business 3.5 years ago. Tim Dyson, as I mentioned, has been in San Francisco for over 20 years, and in fact has been chief exec for 25 years, and he celebrated his 25th anniversary recently. My background was PLC at Capital Radio, where I was there for about 10 years. Had some interesting times with other sort of media folk, including working with Simon Fuller at 19 and helping launch American Idol, which was reasonably successful. Then had some agency life at a group called Engine, which was similar-ish to Next15 in terms of a portfolio of marketing services group, and then joined 3.5 years ago, really to help provide a bit of sort of stability to the group, because we had gone through a slightly troubled time before I joined in terms of probably lack of controls in terms of back office. So I've been fairly active both in terms of improving the quality and control of the financial information, and more latterly on the M&A front. I think when I sort of talk about Next15, a lot of people immediately think, well, you must be like WPP. They're the sort of big gorilla in our space. I think what makes us different is the fact that we have this relentless focus on technology, helped by the fact that my boss is in San Francisco, and so he spends as much time as he can with all the VCs out there, understanding what are they investing in, what's Google doing, what's Facebook's doing, what's Amazon doing, and effectively really then taking that knowledge and understanding and applying to our businesses, because we are a client-facing organization and we're only as good as our ability to understand what's happening next in the world of technology. So having affected the epicenter of the business in Silicon Valley is really helpful in terms of making sure we're ahead of the game. We do virtually no traditional advertising, so TV commercials is not really what we do. And also the likes of WP make most of their money from their media buying. They have these huge organizations which buy media on behalf of the likes of P&G, Unilever, etc. That's a great business, but under pressure because more and more of that money is moving towards digital. And so in terms of what makes us different, we're very much the challenger brand up against the likes of WP, rather than actually having a huge sort of legacy business to effectively, we're all in the challenger space rather than having to defend. The other part of our DNA is we have a very entrepreneurial culture where we have a reasonably lean head office, which is big enough to make sure that the businesses are doing what they're saying. We have strong financial controls, lots of sort of checks and balances. But as far as possible, we like to invest in talent because that's really what we are. We're a talent manager. And we we pick interesting businesses with very strong management teams, and as long as they deliver, we, as far as possible, allow them alone. Because in our experience, entrepreneurs don't like being told what to do, but we have enough checks and balances so that if we do need to help them course correct, we can do that. And also, as you'll see, we tend to work with, major leading companies. Our biggest client is Google, who represent 10% of our business. We've been Facebook's agency of record for the last 10 years, and that's probably our number 2, if not number 3 business now. We work with Amazon, we work with Airbnb. So a lot of our growth is coming from the fact that we are working with very high growth companies. So what do? We have this sort of portfolio of 17 businesses, and we try and, for simplicity's sake, put them into 3 buckets, even though each of the businesses do a bit of everything. Content has really been our sort of core part of the business, and it still represents 75% of the group. Our revenue this year will be roughly 200 million. Our signature agency is Outcast. We're based in San Francisco, very well-run business with about 150 people. They were Facebook's agency of record and helped sort of launch Facebook on the stock market. And we still do a lot of work with them in terms of helping them launch products like the Oculus virtual reality headset. And every time there's a results announcement or a sort of a positioning piece on Facebook, we've pretty almost always been at the heart of that. So creating content for our clients, making sure they're relevant, and also making sure that the content can be used in all the sort of myriad of sort of platforms. So again, we've gone through a bigger sort of transformation in terms of, the old model was about taking journalists out to lunch and hoping they'd write nice things about your client. Now it's much more about creating content which actually can be seeded on companies' own websites. So there's been a big transformation in terms of what we do for clients and also the type of people we employ. The second area is data, where it's only 5% of the group, but I think is going to be the fastest part of our group going forward. And this is, as everyone knows, everybody is swamped with data. So what this business does is gather its own data, as well as trying to work with companies in terms of understanding what data they have, and then represent it back to the company in very user-friendly form. Because I think the biggest challenge companies have is just awash with data. And how do you turn the panoply of data everyone has into actionable insights, so information which you can then make decisions on. So that business is growing fast. It's predominantly in the UK, but we've had a fledgling business in the US. It's gone from 1 million revenue to 10 million revenue over the last 2 years, and we think it's a sort of star in the future. Technology, this is where we work with the likes of sort of Google, where about 4 or 5 years ago, we got commissioned to do some work for Google, looking at what they should do in the retail space. Obviously, Apple have their stores, Google being more a software business. Slightly unclear exactly what they should do. So we did some research and realized very quickly that actually there was no point having a Google store if you're selling a software product. So it was all about creating a credible online retail experience for Google. We were commissioned to design it and then build it. And that's now turned into a sort of multi-year project. Google is roughly 10% of the group's revenue, and there's a lot of future development we have coming from Google. So increasingly now we think of the business in these 3 buckets. And 4 or 5 years ago, looking at this chart, all we did really was create content. We were beginning to see that transformation to digital content from analog content, but we were very much a content company. Now technology represents roughly 20% of the business, and data in its many forms is 5%. And we can see going forward, because all of our clients are increasingly trying to understand this myriad of data they've got and trying to get the holy grail whereby you can use data to help make decisions rather than you made a decision, you then data to tell you whether you made a good decision or not. Increasingly, companies are now trying to use all this data to help them predict what they should do next. And I think everyone's aware that there's so much of the revenue is moving from traditional advertising to much more sort of one-to-one marketing, which then helps inform people what they should do. So I think that's the direction of travel, both for our clients and our business. As I mentioned, we have this sort of portfolio of 17 companies. The biggest one is Tex 100, which still works with IBM, Lenovo, traditional sort of technology companies. It's in 14 countries, very well run out of New York, and seeing sort of consistent revenue growth. The other large companies are Beyond, which doubled in size last year and is now roughly just over 20 million revenue. Actually, and it will be 25 million revenue this year, hence why it's in that bucket. Mbooth and Outcast. Mbooth's a New York-based consumer agency, works with American Express, Twitter, etc., and Outcast as Facebook's its signature client. So we have 4 agencies which represent roughly 60% of the group. And then we have a collection of other agencies which are slightly more in the sort of challenger bracket, run by very entrepreneurial businesses or very entrepreneurial leaders who want to progress up into that 25 million bracket. And I think Mora, which is our research agency, data business, will probably be the first to get there. I think the other thing which surprises people when they look at us is the quality of our client list. And these aren't people who, we did a little bit of work with Facebook, 3 years ago, so therefore we can, badger them as a customer. We were appointed to Facebook as an agency 10 years ago. Alphabet, which is obviously the holding company for Google, is our biggest client, and we have a very strategic relation with them. Microsoft was one of our founder clients, and we still retain them as a client. IBM used to be a lot bigger, but they've, as probably everyone's aware, gone through some interesting challenges. In fact, IBM is now totally future is bet on Watson, which is a sort of machine learning AI business. So we have a very good customer list. And if I put this list up about 5 years ago, at least a dozen of those names were still there. And most of the time, people join the list because we've done an acquisition which actually has brought them onto the list. And the top 20 represents roughly 35% of the group's revenue. Google is by far the biggest at 10%, but the next one after that is sort of Facebook and American Express at roughly sort of 3%. So what's sort of key to our growth? I think the fact that we do work with those high growth clients, and it's one of our challenges is actually keeping pace with these companies like Google and Facebook. If they're driving their top line at 30%, actually how on earth do we sort of keep pace with them and make sure we get a big chunk of their spend? Over the last 3 years, we've done a lot of UK acquisitions, which were a very attractive home for entrepreneurs who, for whatever reason, have probably reached the limit of their ability in their current state, and that may be that they can see an opportunity to grow in the US, but they haven't got the infrastructure, or potentially they're brave enough to do it because a lot of people are aware there's a lot of UK companies who've actually come a cropper by growing into the US. And we have 600 people based in the US. We have 300 San Francisco, 300 New York. We have a whole load of lawyers, accountants, and people who understand visas. And so, one of the things we can do is help mentor ambitious UK companies into the US through our infrastructure. Technology is critical, which I think I mentioned before. Increasingly now we're focusing on the UK-US. That now represents almost 90% of the group's revenue and probably over 90% of the group's profit. And I think, again, before I joined, we were probably in too many territories, and so we've got out of places like South Africa because it was really hard to make money, and even if you could make money, you can never get the money out. So there's been much more sort of focus in terms of markets. We still have a little bit of that in China, but we almost have to be in China. If you're working with the likes of IBM, you have to be able to offer a China opportunity. And also we have a very entrepreneurial culture where we like each of the 17 chief execs to have a very simple targeted incentive plan where they know that if they take the business from here to here, they will be rewarded for that. And we think that's a critical part of our DNA, to have these driven, entrepreneurially, well-regarded and well-rewarded chief execs. Some numbers, which I won't sort of dwell too much on, but we have shown consistent revenue growth, and that's really a combination of 3 factors. It's high organic growth, where which is obviously the best growth if effectively it's from within. Recently, we've had quite a currency benefit, and Brexit, I think we're still slightly all bemused in terms of what it means in the sort of medium term. But in the short term, it's been good for us because of the currency devaluation, and such a high proportion of our revenue, roughly 75% of our revenue, comes from outside the UK. Also, we're seeing UK as a low-cost centre now, which is slightly strange. And so we are transferring some work from San Francisco, which is the most expensive place to hire software developers, and actually doing that work in the UK. So actually, net Brexit so far has been good for us. I think we're all slightly sort of watching and listening to see what does happen over the next sort of 12, 18 months. But you can see we have seen a good growth in the last 5 years. Our year ends January, and just I thought I'd give you a sort of flavour for some of the numbers we presented to our shareholders in the city about a month ago when we had our final results. So we had very strong revenue growth up to 171 million. We're targeting somewhere around 200 million for the current year, so that's the year to January 2018. Hopefully that'll be organic revenue growth, and we'll probably have a little bit of currency benefit because we only had the currency drop post-Brexit in July and onwards, so we're suddenly seeing a sort of tailwind from currency for the first 5 months of our financial year. We had very strong organic growth last year, 10%. I think we'll do well to repeat that because we did have some big one-off projects, but we're definitely targeting high single-digit organic growth. And then in terms of acquisitions, we've got a reasonable pipeline of businesses focused in our sort of core areas of sort of data and technology, but as we all know, acquisitions take some time to come off, and so and they may not come off at all. So I think most of the growth this year will be more driven by organic and currency. Good margin growth, and that's very much been driven out of the UK, where we've fixed some of the problem childs we had in the UK, and also we've been acquiring some quite high margin businesses of sort of 30% margin plus. And you can see we've good increase in profit, good increase in dividends. And in terms of debt, we get slightly nervous if net debt creeps up too much, and the limit we've set ourselves is a debt to EBITDA ratio of less than 1. At the moment it's 0.4, so we have got some capacity for a little bit more M&A, but being a people business, the last thing you want to do is ever feel that your people to feel that you're running the business for the banks rather than the shareholders. So debt is something we definitely don't like. Conscious of time, we had a busy year last year, very strong growth in the US. UK revenues grew predominantly through acquisitions, but also we had a reasonable level of organic growth. The acquisitions were very much in the areas of data technology and digital content. Good growth in APAC, so we're now in 6 countries, and improving margins really through better management, and similarly in continental Europe. And then we've won LinkedIn as a client, General Motors and KPMG. Just some sort of numbers which all seem pretty positive. Sadly, I don't think I'll be able to deliver quite such strong annualised growth this time next year, but I think the city is hoping we can get to near a sort of 30 million in profit next year. I think I can see how we're going to get there, but obviously nothing in life is guaranteed. And then we showed some good dividend growth. I think we're fairly conservative on dividend because we think there's lots of uses for our cash, but I can see maybe that going up 20% plus this year as well. Very quickly, in terms of where we make the money, the US is the biggest part of our group, and that's really driven out of those big names like sort of Google and Facebook, etc. And the margin is pretty strong there at consistently about 21%. UK, where we've had a sort of reinvention of the business, and that's really the margins were depressed because we had some businesses which we needed a bit of fixing, which we've now done, and also we've acquired some good high growth, high margin businesses. And APAC and EMEA, which roughly represent about 12% of the group, we're seeing reasonable growth from, but the real sort of key driver is the business of the US and the UK. Cash, in a way I'm sort of more focused on cash than profit because businesses get into trouble because of lack of cash rather than profit. And there we've actually worked very hard to improve our working capital, so we actually improved our working capital by 6.3 million, i.e. turned debtors, etc. into cash. Part of that was a one-off property where we'd spent a lot of money bringing all our businesses together in San Francisco, but I think there's a bit more to go in terms of improving our working capital. Quite heavy on acquisitions, that 21.6, and tax. Actually, I've got a fantastic tax lady who makes sure that we actually recover as much tax we can from places like India, etc., which is actually quite a challenge. So we end up with net debt of 11.4, which is 0.4 times EBITDA. Got a fair number of earnouts which are spread out fairly evenly, and effectively the way our earnouts work is that they're all performance related. So we tend to buy a business 100%, and then we have a 5-year earnout for the sort of individuals, because we're very keen to retain management rather than buy something and then all the management leave, which is probably not the smartest thing to do if you're buying a people business. So we tend to like to incentivize management over a 5-year period. And the way the maths work is effectively the earnouts pay for themselves, because we own the cash flow, and effectively the person's then earning or being paid the sort of the cash they generate. At the end of the earn-out, we will almost always renegotiate, and either the management sort of want to leave, in which case we'll sit down with them and effectively either agree the next tier down already, or we'll have to hire someone in, or we'll then do a new incentive plan. So a big part of my role is to make sure that each of those 17 management teams has an incentive plan which is there to sort of retain them and incentivize them. So in conclusion, we've had a fantastic year last year, driven by organic growth, currency benefit of Brexit and acquisitions. I think we've got a lot of momentum in the business, and hopefully we can sort of keep going very strongly. There's a couple of appendices, again, just a few sort of figures which really show that we have 36 clients with generating more than $1 million worth of fee income. So even though Google is a big client of ours, we have got quite a spread of other clients. We have been increasing numbers. A lot of that increase in numbers is actually in APAC, where we've outsourced quite a lot of stuff to India, particularly in terms of back office. So, revenue per head is slightly distorted by that. But we've got a good spread of businesses. Balance sheet, probably not the most exciting thing to end on. So, it says wrap up. So I think I've wrapped up.
What's your position on ethics and integrity, and how do you enforce it? This question was driven by your reference to WPP, who a few years ago were caught out with their subsidiary in Australia, Buchanan's, who were putting plants on the bulletin boards to disrupt the personal investor.
I mean, we generally have a fairly simple business model, which is, we employ 1,600 people, and our business works best when all those people are gainfully employed working on client business. We don't really do much sort of media buying or areas where effectively you're representing other people. So, everyone when they join has to sign up to the Bribery Act. We work in India and China, where effectively we have to be slightly conscious that sometimes business ethics there, so without offending anybody, sorry. Maybe you have a slightly different perspective. So, but it's something which is in our DNA, and we're very conscious that we're only as good as our reputation. So we do ensure as far as possible that people understand that, and when they sign up to a code of ethics. I'm not sure I quite answered your question, but so is there anything more I can do to help? Or I mean, I think we do have a very simple business where we work with clients, and our whole role is all about exceeding and delighting their expectations. So,
I have a question, if I may.
Yeah, please do.
On your chart, you showed the different brands, and you showed that you only had one in the data business, and that was an area you're expecting or hopeful for lots of growth from. And I guess it's two parts question. Are there other acquisition opportunities for you, or do you feel as though you've got the right company in that and you've got it covered already? And secondly, is there a chance or that your clients then also become your competitors? The brands you had on your chart there, they're often involved in things like big data analysis. Will you end up going up against the people you're working for already?
In terms of the first question, we've got a great management team who've taken the business from 1 million revenue to 10 million revenue in 2 years. Now, that's effectively been achieved through probably 50-60% organic growth and a couple of acquisitions. One thing I've done is recognise that they do need to be strengthened, and so I've got this fantastic UK CFO who wanted to get some operational experience, so he's gone in there as their COO to put a bit more sort of rigour and process in there, and also he's looking at M&A. So as of today, we've got heads on one business, which would actually get them to a slightly different part of the value chain, and then we're looking at another business which would get us into the financial services sector. So I think that business has the right management team now, and it'll be a question of high organic growth and M&A to get us to that 20%. Now, we may decide that we want to enter a completely different part of the data chain, in which case then that would probably be an entirely different acquisition. But I think we can get most of the way there through the existing management team, through M&A and a bit of organic growth. I mean, I think it's a bit like everyone's now a technology business and everyone's a data business. And so what we have to do is make sure that our offering to our clients is very focused in terms of adding value to them. And I think in many cases we can help our clients by pointing out to them, actually you've got a huge amount of data here. If you actually just reorganize the data, then suddenly you get much better information, and we can then provide consultancy to make sure that that information gets turned into actual insight. So I think going forward, the whole data area is going to be one of sort of huge growth for companies. And actually I think the more cognizant companies are of the data they have, then the more opportunities that gives us. Because at the moment, a lot of companies just can't see the wood from the trees. And I think if we can infect them with, actually, you've got some really valuable information here, which you just, if you reordered it, could really help you to make the right decisions at the right time. Well, at the moment, you're just kind of a bit lost in the trees. So I think everybody will become a technology company, everyone will become a data company, and actually the winners will be those people who actually use data and technology to best effect. God, last time I did this, I had about 20 questions. Obviously,
I've got a question actually, Peter. Just wondered if you could comment on the competitive landscape. And, you know, I mean, obviously you operate in a lot of different markets, but perhaps you could give a sort of a summary of that.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, if I asked each of the 17 chief execs, who do you compete with?
Yeah.
They'd all come up with a different answer, which is hence why I'll have to be unbelievably generalist. I think those who are specialising in niche areas with a digital data product are going to win. Those who are trying to be generalist and be, you know, one size fits everything, I think will lose, because I think clients are increasingly wanting to go to the best person who can solve a specific problem for them. And, you know, WP is a fantastic business and has got huge buying power and can offer massive discounts. But ultimately, you know, in order to win long term, they've got to offer the best solution to clients with their problems. And I think we can sort of, you know, we can be a bit more nimble and dive in and identify a problem and solve it very quickly, because, you know, that's the way we're structured. While if you're a WPP, often companies who work with WP get very frustrated because they're told you have to work with that bit of WP when they know that someone down the road is better. They may not be cheaper, but they're better. And, you know, someone like Google, you know, not to be quoted, but actually cost doesn't really enter the equation. It's all about, can you do the job, can you do it right, and how fast can you do it? Google's all about speed, it's not actually about cost. And so, to some extent, you know, that's why I think they like working with us, because we can move unbelievably fast and we can get it right. You know, WP without doubt could do it cheaper, but actually I don't think it'd do as well and as fast. So I think it's all about specialists and niche going forward, because that's what clients want.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Peter. Appreciate that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.